Welcome to episode 480 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and I've got who else with me? Rafa Aldamuy. We are recording this on Tuesday night, so it's likely Thursday afternoon or evening, or even Friday when you're hearing this. So you probably will be likely hearing from future Dan at some point, which would still be past Dan for you, but you get the point. If news drops of something and then I'll happen to jump in with a different shirt and interrupt. And if you're watching on video or audio, then I'll just jump in and tell you this is me from the future or whatever. But if not, we still get to wax poetic about midfielders because, again, I had planned to do Tuesday's show, which was the Man City show. And I said whenever that went official is when we'd release it. Well, the day we had scheduled to do it was a day or hours after it goes official. So that wound up being Tuesday's show. But still, we're recording this, figuring it all out because the journey, Rafa, in the transfer window, at least, is not done. As far as signing players and registering players, well, I think we're technically, we'll say step 2, right? Inigo Martinez, Gundogan, like those are step 1. Those are the players that were going to come on a free, wanted to come, here they go. They're going to be the first ones to get registered. Then kind of the deli line, you got to take a number because just because a player might sign for the pivot position does not mean they would be registered in a timely fashion. Very much like Koundé had to wait. It could be very much the same thing. But before we do that, Rafa, being that I asked a Man City fan for that whole show how he thought of the Barcelona move, and he approved, gave 2 big thumbs up. How excited are you as a Kool-Aid about the Gundogan signing?
I'm fairly excited. I would say a 7, 7-ish, because how many times did we talk about last season how we needed to improve the quality of our depth? And I mean, of course, Gundogan will probably be a starter with Barcelona, but thinking about an entire season where we're going to obviously the goal is to fight for all 3 top competitions, and then you add the Spanish Super Cup plus 4 FIFA fixtures, 3 in the first half of the season. We know that Pedri, sadly, when the most important part of the season has come, he's been injured because he's been played a bunch of minutes. Gavi, so far, yet he hasn't shown to be as injury prone as Pedri, but we know that when both of them got injured, when Frenkie got injured, especially when Pedri got injured, we didn't have any kind of magic in the midfield because, let's be honest, Sergio Roberto ain't that guy. We've discussed that forever here. Kessie ain't that guy as well. For whatever reason, Xavi didn't count with Pablo Torre last season. So I'm excited because of that, because I know he's probably going to be a starter, but also that will give, and I hope, let's see how Xavi manages everything, but at least in theory, that will allow Xavi to, in Spanish, we say dosificar. In English, I don't know how you technically translate that word, but it'll allow Xavi to not push the gas to the pedal with Pedri. And basically, during the first half of the season, which, again, Pedri's going to go with the Spanish national team if he's healthy, then that's going to allow Xavi to rest Pedri for the quote-unquote more important games, and the quality is not going to drop. You could argue that it's either it's going to stay the same or it's going to go up a little bit. So especially talking about Pedri, because Gavi, yes, he's really good with pressing and whatnot. He's an elite at that, but that kind of magic with the ball at his feet, that's Pedri. Gavi still, in my opinion, is not at that level yet, which Gundogan is. So I'm excited, but I wouldn't say a 10. I would say a 7.
Well, yeah, I think when you talk about just how essential he could be and how important he could be, yeah, he does not complete a squad. He does not move the needle in terms of the ceiling of Barcelona in the next 5 years, again, being 32 already. But what he does do, to your point, and I've said it about Pedri, I have a video that I've already filmed that is ready to go about Pedri and his importance. And you mentioned that I think we get caught up because of social media and because of lineups. You and I have both worked behind the scenes. Like, everything is about the excitement and leading up to a match. Sometimes that excitement building to a match can mean as much as the 90 minutes that people are actually watching the game. And then if they lose, you forget about it as fast as possible and things like that. So I think we get caught up in this idea of a Gala 11. And what Gundogan is that if everybody is healthy and a pivot, who again is the focus of our show, is to arrive, then you are talking about, no disrespect to Kessie, because I think we'll hit him later on in the show, but you wouldn't really worry about him. You'd say that you have a 5-man midfield between Gabi, Pedri, De Jong, and Gundogan, and then again that pivot. And it is very much a who's the opponent, who played last time, what was the game against Real Madrid, or when is this game? Because as I said last week in the show that I was answering listener questions with that fixture list, I don't care so much about when this big match is coming or what day that is. I care more about the match congestion, because again, if Barcelona are drawn in a group with whoever it may be, right, a tough number 2 that you have to worry about, and Barcelona wind up having Dortmund and then Real Madrid and then Benfica, right, in like a Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, that's a tough week. And I care more about that fixture list than I do about when Real Madrid, like when El Clasico is truly, right? Like we build up to that game, yes, but it's more about the congestion in the schedule. And in the case of Gundogan, to your point as well, does he start, or does Gabi start, or does Pedri start? To call them any of them the starter, I think is going to, that's kind of reductive to how good Barcelona can be, right? Because again, against Dortmund, you could start Pedri and Gabi, and Gundogan doesn't need to start against his old club. Then Real Madrid, it's Gabi coming off the bench, and it's Pedri and Gundogan. And then for the Wednesday, it's whoever was fit, or whoever, maybe Pedri gets then Pedri would get the rest, if you will, like the next Thursday. Or I still think he's going to be, that being Pedri, essential in a way that we're not going to be able to get around. I don't think Xavi's going to be able to avoid playing Pedri any chance he can against big opponents. But to that point, I think Gundogan really does unlock just taking so much pressure off Pedri, and that is essential to do. It is so important that Pedri is not being asked to, as Xavi has probably asked him to do, instead of touching the ball 70 times, it's touched it 100 and 110 times, still make the same number of tackles he does, and if anything without Busquets, make more tackles, make more interceptions, work harder on the defensive end without Busquets, and that's impossible. So, speaking of Busquets, to Inter Miami, he has gone, and everybody's announced it. So congrats to him. I'm looking forward to cutting that content. And I'm excited to watch him and Messi doing their thing, and potentially Alba soon. But everyone and their mother has admitted, including you and I just did it, that the Gundogan signing has not solved the defensive midfielder problem at Barcelona. And while the attack will be much, much more potent, that is what I'll say many, many times. If you don't know who Gundogan is, go back and listen to the show from earlier in this week. He is going to help the attack in ways that are profound and ways that will not affect the defensive end. That is what my Man City expert let me know. So the defensive setup for Barca without Busquets is obviously going to suffer without a much more natural, deeper fit down the field. So I thought it'd be fun to start with the clickable moment, Rafa, and then we'll move from there. So I'm going to list the names of the rumored defensive midfielders, and you rank them from yes, please, to heck no. And then I think we'll go one by one and see where we're at with them. All right. So I'm making it a little easier for my shout out to Anise, my social media editor for TikTok, just trying to make this easy and clippable for you. So Brozovic on the list, Dani Parejo, that name has really popped up. Oriol Romeu has popped up. Amrabat still exists out there. And I think we're going to go with those 4, unless you have a 5th or 6th or 7th that I have not heard about. But those are the 4 of the week. So we're hearing Brozovic, Parejo, Oriol Romeu, and Amrabat. So from yes to heck no, give me your 1 to 4 ranking.
So my 1 to 4 ranking, yes, Brozovic as a number 1. Yes, Amrabat as number 2. Which were the other 2?
Dani Parejo and Oriol Romeu.
Oriol Romeu as number 3. It's like, And number 4, heck no, Dani Parejo as a defensive pivot to replace Busquets. Let me be clear on that.
All right. Well, it sounds like your list and Barcelona's list are kind of similar at this point, switching the 4 to 2 and 3 to and 2 to 4, switching Amrabat and Parejo. But we'll get into why that would be at this point. But let's start with Brozovic here, right? I feel like I felt like I needed to knock Brozovic farther down the list as of yesterday. So by this time, he might have even agreed to sign for Barcelona because this news is all coming out so quickly. So I think by the time you have this in your ears, it's either you know that he might be a future Barcelona player or he's likely heading to Saudi Arabia because Al Nassr and Inter Milan have a deal in place already since Sunday for 22 to 23 million with incentives. And there's no issue between the two clubs. They've agreed it. The 30-year-old Croatian midfielder, you thought that he might go for 15 to 20, but of course, the Saudi Arabian clubs are generally bidding a little bit higher, as you have to do to get somebody out of Europe, which is, again, totally fair. Like, if you were a South American team who had money, you do the same thing. You have to bid higher if you're not on the continent because you can't promise Champions League football in Europe. So the deal would be for Brozovic would earn around 20 million euros a year, and actually more than the transfer fee of 22-23. That was the number that Barcelona cannot sign off on. 20 million euros for Brozovic. That's about what Lewandowski makes, which is going up. You cannot give a 30-year-old Brozovic the same as you give Lewandowski. Age actually not mattering because of Lewandowski, but he would then sign a contract as well to June of 2027, which is 3 guaranteed years, taking him to the age of 33. So again, per available wages, you'd have to think that Barca can't go above like 10 mil for what they have left as far as wages to spend, and that is if Kessie, Ansu, and Ferran, 2 of those 3 even leave in that situation. That said, most recently, this is like 2 hours ago, apparently Barcelona is still very close to the signing of Brozovic, who, again, as of Sunday, could have agreed to the Saudi Arabian or the Al Nassr deal, and then the signing for Barcelona, though, would be around 18 to 20 mil transfer fee, and the player would then receive a salary of 6.5 mil. Now, why I believe those rumors, this latest rumors about the Barcelona stuff, it's not just, rumblings that it could happen. 6.5 mil net is the exact number that I would guess you'd want a starting pivot like Brozovic to be on. At the age of 30 for 6.5 mil, for him to sign on that number, that says that he wants to stay in Europe and he wants to play at Barcelona. 6.5 would be the number. And then 18 to 20 to get him away from Inter Milan for them to make that deal. It's close enough to the number they're asking for, which is 20 to 25, for them to agree to that deal as well if Brozovic is pushing for the move to Barcelona. So I think in this case, I'm not saying it would be a done deal. Again, by the time this is out, this might all be redundant and in the past, but that latest rumor does make a lot of sense to me. And as far as what I think he is as a player, I think he's exactly what Barcelona would want. He's not Busquets, and there are things that he is different about doing and ways that he is different. He's not going to read the game as quickly. He's not going to be in the right positions all the time, but his work rate is just as good. He's very good at cutting out counterattacks. He's very good under pressure with the ball, and he's very good at making quick decisions and pacing and building through a game. He's also pretty good at long passing, not as good as Busquets, but anyway, you could see enough of what they're losing from Busquets that Brozovic is able to fill that gap to a really high level along with Gundogan. And that midfield goes from what was a B, what would you say last year's midfield was? A B minus? I mean, maybe a B plus actually. I mean, they won the Liga. A minus, B plus. And that turns that midfield 5 into, I would argue, an A plus. Like literally an A plus of Gavi, De Jong, Pedri, Gundogan, and Brozovic. That's an A plus midfield.
To me, this is very simple. I would argue that it's the same as the whole Messi case. If Brozovic wants to come to Barcelona, he's going to have to wait. So it's all going to come down to whether he wants to wait and be with us or not and just sign with Al Nassr. The same with Messi. Messi didn't want to wait. Messi, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into that. Everybody can think whatever they want. Messi didn't want to wait.
Well, yeah, you said he's an impatient coward. That's what you said Messi was. I heard.
Hey, damn! You threw the Messi hive at me now.
No,
but I speak with. It's the ugly truth. Messi didn't want to wait. I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm scared of the Messi hive. But Brozovic, if Brozovic,
about it, we already did it.
Exactly, but everybody knows
not to wait.
If Messi wanted to wait,
his tears
could have
2020. But I'm saying his tears from 2020, he didn't have to wait for anybody. Like he's in the right. Messi's in the right at this point in his career with what he's
exactly
given anywhere he
wants.
He
can do whatever he wants, and that's exactly what he did. But if he wanted to if he wanted to come back to Barcelona, he needed to wait. He wasn't willing to do that. So now with Brozovic, it's the same thing. If Brozovic wants to come to Barcelona, he knows that he needs to wait. And so far, it's June 27th, he's waited. How long will he wait? How long do we need? How long does Laporta, how long does Mateo and company need him to wait? I don't know. But if he does wait, I think he is the perfect, with Amrabat, in my opinion, the perfect gap. Well, I know Amrabat is younger than Brozovic, but what I'm trying to get at is that if eventually down the line, let's say 2, 3, 4 years, hopefully Barcelona's economic situation is better than what it is right now, and some young defensive midfielder prospect comes out of nowhere that perfectly fits Barcelona's style of play better than Brozovic and Amrabat, then in the next 4 years, then we can make a bid for that player, whoever that ends up being. And in between those 3 to 4 years, we do have a good defensive midfielder like Brozovic or Amrabat, because what I'm trying to get at is, let's take out of our heads Sergio Busquets. He's a unicorn. We're probably not going to ever see a defensive midfielder like that checks all the boxes for what is, quote-unquote, Barcelona's preferred style of play. In my opinion, I'm worried about Real Madrid next year if they already signed Jude Bellingham. I think that's going to be... I know maybe it takes a little bit, like a year for him to adapt. Maybe it doesn't. I know he's very young. But if he adapts to La Liga and Real Madrid quickly, that's going to be trouble for us. We already know that Vinicius is trouble for us. If, God forbid, they end up getting Kylian Mbappe this summer, and we have to deal with counterattacks from Vinicius, Mbappe, Jude Bellingham, Camavinga, Federico Valverde, and company, we are going to need specialists. Obviously, we have Araujo. Sadly, Araujo is very injury prone. We have Jules Koundé. He's very good. But we know what happened last year when one of them or both of them were injured. I know we just got Íñigo Martinez, but Marcos Alonso is still with the team. Eric, we don't know what's going to happen. But my biggest worry is that Araujo and Koundé, if they are fit, they're going to need help. They're going to need help trying to stop those counterattacks. I know Gavi is going to help with that. Gundogan, Pedri, and their little intricacies, positioning and whatnot. But that's why I'm so bent with, I know Amrabat it's dying down, the rumor and whatnot. But I got out of my head. I play like Subimendi, like, oh my God, Subimendi, he's the closest thing to Busquets. Let's get it out of our heads. No, he might be technically in terms of style and whatnot, but I'd rather have somebody who's gonna sprint, defend, do the dirty work. Because let's remind ourselves, before Busquets, obviously there was Yaya Touré. He was freaking amazing. I loved Yaya. But before that, we had Van Bommel. We had Edmilson. They were good defensive midfielders, but they weren't Busquets, especially Van Bommel. He was a wrecking machine. So I know that some people are like bent on, oh no, and even Xavi himself, oh, we need the closest thing to Busquets that there is. But I don't share that opinion with Xavi. If that person doesn't exist, which I don't think he does, I don't think Martin Subimendi is that guy, then I think I'd rather have somebody who's going to do the dirty work and help the defense, especially if Araujo or Koundé are injured, or even Christensen, who's also been injury prone, who is going to help him in those defensive tasks, especially against Real Madrid, because I don't know how their team is going to end up looking. One thing is having Joselu as your main striker for the entire season, and another one is having
Yeah.
Kylian Mbappe for the entire season. So
I don't think
maybe
it's a bigger jump. I don't think it's a bigger jump in world football. I mean, that's why I let you know that Mbappe is probably coming, because if Real Madrid really thinks that they're going to go out there and they made a big splash from Jude Bellingham, and then they're going to put Josuelo up top and have him be the number 9 at
exactly. So if they get Kylian Mbappe alongside Vinicius, he's amazing, Rodrigo, Camavinga, Jude Bellingham, and whatnot, then I don't think it's that much of a stretch that La Liga might come down to those two clásicos.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm leaning towards a more defensive midfielder. I know it's kind of like an oxymoron. Obviously, he's a defensive midfielder, but I would rather have Brozovic or Amrabat.
You're saying a one who is profiled always as a destroyer type,
as
opposed to a player that would in Spanish be called the pivote, right? That is profiled as a pivot. And shout out to a friend of the show. I mean, again, if you're watching this or listening to this, you likely are already following the Purist somewhere on YouTube with the numbers he's putting up. But the Purist did have a video all about Busquets, and I think he really made me rethink the idea of, like, not even the Busquets, but like drawing a line through Barcelona from Busquets to Guardiola, but not Guardiola the manager, Guardiola the player, and saying, what was the job of Guardiola the player for Cruyff? What did he represent for Cruyff in that era? And it was the coach on the field, not like pointing and the captain in that way, even though Busquets obviously was a captain. But I mean, like, the eyes of the coach on the field are best seen through the eyes of Busquets, in the way that for Cruyff, it was best seen through the eyes of Guardiola. And so to find the quote unquote replacement for Busquets, it sounds like dogmatic and reductive because of how good football is, and everybody has high level information now and training, and there are no secrets, right? Like, players go from academy to academy. There's so much movement at the youth levels now, coaches as well, and philosophies are everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like La Masia has these great secrets of football like 15 years ago the propaganda told you that they did. But there is this weird thing where it's like to replace not Busquets or Guardiola, but to replace what they mean for the Barcelona manager on the field, you get the feeling that the next Busquets can only come from the academy. He can only be groomed by La Masia in that entorno, in that world, basically to grow up to be the pivot at Barcelona. Like, that is, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing he's always been built to do. And that's why those pivots through the years with all this Busquets stuff have always had, not say pressure, but you've heard those names more than you've heard the other midfield names, right? Like, there's a lot of attacking midfielders at Barcelona through the years, right? You hear some of the special ones, the ones with big PR teams, but you hear the pivots more than you hear the other midfielders, right? And not to go to Oriol Romeu too quick, but we're going to get to him now because you already mentioned Amrabat. But for Oriol Romeu, we're going back 10 years now. It was Ilya Sanchez, it was Oriol Romeu, Sergi Samper, Gerard Gumbau, Oriol Busquets, Jandro Oriana, and now it looks like Marc Casado and Pau Prim are next in line even. And a reminder too, Marc Casado was not a pivot all the way up through. He was kind of a center midfielder, more of a box-to-box midfielder, can also play the pivot, and he plays the pivot for Barça Athletic, but he was never like earmarked as like the high level. Like, this is, again, was he ever born to do that? I don't think Marc Casado was always groomed and born to do that in a way that Pau Prim is. I'm not hyping up Pau Prim. I'm saying he is the next one in the list of players of the guys I just named. Il Sanchez has been in MLS for a long time. Oriol Romeu, we're about to talk about. Sergi Samper has been injured and in Japan. Gerard Gumbau has been in the first and the second divisions. Oriol Busquets is on the bench somewhere in France. Last time we checked, and he just injuries destroyed his career as well. And Jandro Oriana is on the bench at Andorra, not like a starter at Andorra, like on the bench for Andorra, which was a bottom and a half team in the Segunda division. So there's always been this pipeline, and the idea of replacing Busquets, I said, like, I don't know, like, credit to the purists for making me think about that differently. To say that, like, Barcelona need to bring in somebody to play as a defensive midfielder. They do, like, to your point, they need a defensive midfielder, right? Because the pivot isn't out there. You're right. Like, Zubamendi, not that I've been lukewarm on him, but to me, he is a B minus of what you asked him to do. Like, he's not the heir to Busquets. That player, I believe, truly has to be manufactured from within, and we don't know who that is. Even if it is Pau Prim, he just turned 18. Like, hold our horses. Like, you're not going to have the successor to Busquets or the next, again, not even Busquets, but Busquets, Guardiola, the manager's eyes on the field. That person is not going to come into effect for a few years now.
I think the key word here is expectations. That's why, in my opinion, we as Barcelona fans, we should lower our expectations. And I think if either Brozovic or Amrabat come in, I don't think anybody in the world, Barcelona fans are expecting Brozovic or Amrabat to be anywhere near Busquets' level. While Subimendi, whether that did him a favor or not, has been compared to Busquets. And hey, this guy, he's not going to be exactly as Busquets, but he's quote unquote the closest thing to Busquets. And like you said, I think the next Busquets, if we ever see somebody like him for God knows how much, like how many years, it's so intricate that odds are, like you said, that player is going to come from La Masia. It might be in 2 years, 5 years, 10, 20, 30, who knows? But it's so what Busquets did and Guardiola back in the day, it's so intricate in the nuances of what the Barcelona way. And if you're hearing this, I'm making air quotes, that anybody that comes after Busquets, like we know, it's all about expectations. And on top of that, if Subimendi had come in or comes in on a free, or his transfer fee is 10, 15, but 60 in our current economic situation, that's only going to grow the expectations of him, because if we pay 60 for him right now in our current economic state, then everybody's going to, hey, you need to perform now and you need to be the closest thing to Busquets that there is. And like you said, maybe he's not. Maybe he's like a wish version of Busquets. But for 60, we don't. We need the exact replica, not a wish version.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's what worries me.
When it comes to like Barcelona, I'm using of course too, like Barcelona way, or players that have that vibe. Even like Pedri is. And Kool-Aid's know it when you see it. Like, Pedri is the most Barcelona player that we've seen in a long time. Like, you just feel it. You see it. Like, that's why he can't get away from the Iniesta comparisons, because he has that La Pausa, and most other defensive midfielder isn't going to have that pause. He's not going to be able to stop time and make the right decision almost every time. But to that point too, we went up Yaya Toure, and you and I are of a certain age where I really enjoyed Yaya Toure. Like,
I loved
reason Yaya Toure is not spoken about in all the ways that he is A, because of Busquets, and B, because, again, he was just too good to be there. Like, City fans love him. Like, when he left, I remember this, when he left, Kool-Aid had to be like, we don't need him. Like, we're fine without him. And it's true. Like, they were fine without him, because Busquets, Xavi, and Iniesta are three of the top 50 midfielders of all time in all of football history. But Yaya Toure was class. Yaya Toure was awesome. And it was just a matter of, like, I would have loved to be able to play with 13 on the field so that Yaya Toure could still be a starter and have stuck around. And so it doesn't have to be exactly this box that you're putting this midfielder in. You can win Champions League, as Barcelona did, without Guardiola and without Busquets, because that 2006 Champions League happened. And if Barcelona to win a Champions League with the roster constructed the way it is, that I'm basically seeing a mirror, not to Xavi being the next Guardiola or being the next Cruyff, but Xavi being the next Frank Rijkaard, in the way that this squad is built and the way that team is going to have to win, and the way that world football is trending as well. Where I think in 2006, there was, we were kind of coming out of the days of Serie A being on top. The Premier League was on the rise. Sure, Liga had a lot of good teams, but it was an odd period in the mid 2000s. I can tell you that. Like, Arsenal had been Arsenal with the Invincibles a few years prior, and it was kind of a mixed bag of no league was on top. It was kind of anybody in the Champions League could do anything at any time. And at that time, too, I can say that there was, this parity across of all of world football. There wasn't like so dogmatic philosophies of this and this and this. And I think times are different, sure. But, as we go through this list, it's tough, because when you talk about Amrabat and you talk about Oriol Romeu, they feel like opposites, but they're not that different. Like, when you look at their numbers, they're judged by the same metrics. Their winning is judged by the same metrics. And in the case of Amrabat, to put a close on this, I've said it about 100 times already, but it sounds like Fiorentina wants 25 mil for him. He's 26. He's in his prime. And so the Viola is perfectly in their rights to say, hey, yeah, 25 mil for like a guy in his prime. And Xavi isn't sold on him for that number, which I think is different than Xavi not wanting that player and rejecting that transfer. And Xavi, as well as, it might not even be Xavi. Like Xavi just might be the name that they're saying, like, because Alamani and Deco can't necessarily get a deal done, and Jordi Cruyff before him. But I also don't think that deal is dead. Like, I don't think it's dead, because I think Amrabat is willing to be patient for Barca to come back later in the summer, just like they did in January. And maybe that price tag goes down if Fiorentina tested the market and they couldn't find the right number with another team, while Barcelona would also have failed to find the midfielder they need. So Amrabat in the first week of August for like 12 mil, I think is very much still on the table. And that is how, to me, I think that's how that deal would get done. By the way, to your point about waiting and sticking around, you do remember Barcelona's most famous example of having to sit around and wait to be registered, right? Pretty good player for Barcelona. Remember who it was?
Who?
Luis Suarez. Because
after the World Cup, 24.
Well, his ban, right? He got to sit out with his own ban, but Barcelona also had that ban based on the youth stuff.
Hey, fun fact, so that everybody knows, I went to Luis Suarez's first. Well, technically, the Catalunya Super Cup is an official tournament, isn't it? I think so. It might be, it might not be, but whatever. Technically, I think it was his first or his second game, because I think he played in the Barcelona's training ground. I don't remember against who, but in the Catalunya Super Cup, I was there watching Luis Suarez even before he debuted against Real Madrid in that Clásico at the Bernabeu. And just wanted to throw that fact out there, because, hey, like you said, I agree with you. I think, and I love the fact that you compared this Barcelona, like Xavi's Barcelona so far. This is way closer to Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona than it is to Guardiola's 09 and 2011 team. And that's why I think, even for the younger listeners out there that maybe didn't get to see Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona, it was a good team, but it wasn't anywhere near the intricacy, the beautiful, I don't want to say tiki-taka because Guardiola hates that term as well, but you know what I'm trying to say. The beautiful style of play that Barcelona played under Guardiola throughout his entire tenure, especially 2011. So,
in football terms, it wasn't total football the way that Cruyff and Guardiola and that philosophy brings it up, because those players didn't all mesh in that way. It's very much about function, right? Like Ronaldinho had his function, therefore Edmilson had to have his function, and Van Bommel had to have his function because Ronaldinho had his. And it's very much, you see Xavi's Barcelona, right? Because you have Lewandowski and Dembele, and Frankie has to operate a certain way, and Araujo can do certain things and can't do others with his feet. And so, like, you don't have all these players that fit in this total football, stepping where they need to step. No, players are limited in certain ways and really excel in other ways. And so it is Xavi's job, just like it was Rijkaard's, for that balancing out that says, how do we use this player to counteract this player's weaknesses and kind of fit that puzzle piece together, and kind of everybody does their job and everybody does their function to win at the highest level, which again is different than the very, Cruyff and Guardiola, like they're legitimate philosophies. But again, that Guardiola was able to do because he had Messi, because Messi fit with everybody, right? I mean, and if you want the counterexample to that, it's watch the Ibrahimovic and Messi moments. If that even exists, Ibrahimovic might have paid to get rid of it off the internet. But like, go back and watch some of those games, and you're like, it felt like it was, the beautiful game, or as you just said, like the tiki-taka of Guardiola. It felt like they were trying to do that, and they were trying to squeeze it out of it. But it was like trying to put, the toothpaste back in the tube, where it's just like, but they already made the signing of Ibrahimovic, and they're like, Edo made sense, and now something doesn't make sense. And it was just like fighting against itself in philosophy. But speaking of a player that, again, about philosophy, Oriol Romeu, real quick here, I've already rehashed it. For Girona, he has a contract till 2025, but he'll be 32 next season. So that buyout will be rather simple. He'll just ask Girona, hey, do you mind if I leave? And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever, we don't care. He just arrived this season from Southampton, but he fit really well in the Liga. And what I like about him, both in the box midfield or in a double pivot, whatever you want to call it, like same thing, he was so important to Alex Garcia being really, really good and really important. So what Oriol Romeu would allow Frankie de Jong to do is have that freedom that Busquets allowed him to have. and that's why I do like Oriol Romeu. I see not a like-for-like fit for Busquets. Again, we're talking about his talent and his ceiling, whatever. But I'm talking about the function that Busquets allowed De Jong to do. I see a lot of that in the way Oriol Busquets did that for Alex Garcia. So that gives me some confidence in Oriol Romeu, his level to, at minimum in La Liga, do this job. He would also, Barcelona would offer a 3-year contract is what I saw, take him to 35, which is like something, but it would be at 2.5 to 3 mil gross, meaning if in 3 years they want to give him a contract of termination, he is from the city. Like, he's a guy that'd be like, yeah, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give me the 6 million I'm owed and I'll retire or go away or go to Qatar or wherever. Like, I don't care. So that seems like it'd be very clean. Now, Dani Parejo, we're going to end it here. This is what's interesting, right? Because he's not, I mean, how much does he have left in the tank as a 34-year-old? He recently turned 34, and I'm not like age shaming with this, but he's been around the block. Now, his 34 is different as well because he came up through Real Madrid system, got some time with Edafe in his early 20s when Madrid cut him loose, but then his move to Valencia really propelled his career, kind of, because it actually took 2 years of him waiting his turn, but once he got his spot in the 2013-14 season, it was his. But with Valencia's owner, if he wasn't so competent, he would have ended the European portion of his career at Valencia as a club legend. But instead, off to Villarreal he went, where he's made over 100 appearances there already since 2000. And I find it so tough with him because Dani Parejo, that name, has always bounced around Barcelona for years. Almost every summer you see him linked for 7-8 years now since he really broke on at Valencia. And Xavi has shown an affection to him prior to being a manager because he knows him. Because Parejo is so interesting because, like Mikel Arteta as a player, Julen Guerrero, Xavi Prieto, the Real Sociedad midfielder, if he is born in a different era or different country, that being Dani Parejo, he might have 50 international caps to his name instead of just the 4, right? And so when I ask that question, how much does he have left in the tank? I do consider all that stuff, that he hasn't played international football. He was in and out of European competition, depending on the season. So he's played like 8 just domestic matches less per season, and he's largely avoided injuries throughout his career. At times, he's played as an 8 in front of a destroyer-type midfielder, which he did at Villarreal with Capu or Keklin before they got injured. But actually, when Villarreal were at their best last season, including a 3-2 win over Real Madrid, he was the pivot in a 4-3-3 behind Alex Mena and Ramon Terrats, neither of which I would accuse of defending much, which is why Terrats actually came out of that game in the 33rd minute for another plus 30 player in Mano Trigueros to run around and defend in front of the back line alongside Parejo. So if De Jong is willing to defend, then Parejo does make a bit of sense in that double pivot because he can do it at Villarreal at this point is in his career, and he has done it. He has a good sense to it. And apparently the club also presented a proposal to 1 year plus an additional year, and he apparently wants 2 years guaranteed, which again is totally fair. So Xavi would be the one who'd have to speak to him and work him down to the 1 year plus 1 additional year. And you'd also expect his number would be what, like 4 mil a year, 4 to 5 mil salary, right? If Romeu is 2.5 to 3 and Brozovic is 6.5, you'd have to say Dani Parejo is probably like 4, even though he's 2 years older than Oriol Romeu. But like you, I have my doubts. Doubts how that's all going to fit, and I would save money and just go with Oriol Romeu. I'm with you on that.
Don't get me wrong. I really like Dani Parejo as a midfielder. I think he's amazing. I think he's really, really good. If he was called Dani Pajeriño, I think he would have been sold to a big Premier League club and whatnot. But if he's coming, and we're talking about him as a defensive pivot, and I know he played there a few times last season, Villarreal, this and that. But for the entire season, for him to be Barcelona's defensive midfielder in La Liga, in the Champions League, at 34, and him being the type of player that he is, I think that's insane. To me, that's almost as insane as Real Madrid having Joselu be their number 9 striker for the entire season, this upcoming season. It would be the same kind of craziness. So to me, I don't know how. I know the rumor is true, but to me that would be insane. Like, I would rather have 100 million times Oriol Romeu ahead of Dani Parejo as our low cost, low budget defensive midfielder if we can't get either Brozovic or Amrabat. Because Dani Parejo, to me, the fact that Dani Parejo is being talked about as an option for Barcelona's defensive midfielder spot, to me, is just insane.
Well, it tells you what Barcelona has already known, and the club does this all the time, and you know this, that the club, I think, when they have their early meetings, and I mean, people, I don't know if you've ever been, I think in my whole life, not to tell people how my humble origins are, but in my whole life, I think I've been in 3 like board meetings or like meetings of people who own something, you know, and I was like in those meetings based because of like as a director of broadcasting, or they had me come in just to like give a presentation or something. So I'm sitting there in those things. And I know in those board meetings, because you got a lot of people who say yes to you a lot around you all the time. So you do have some kind of faith and confidence that the things you want to happen will manifest themselves because you want them to happen enough, right? So I can tell you that, again, this is no disservice to the job that Laporta and his crew, and even not necessarily on the money so much in Deco, but like his financial crew and even the ones who are in charge of the economics. Again, it's not just him. It's Juan Roma, it's everybody else. So I think they, in their initial meetings, probably said things like, you know, Frankie, we've been on him for years now, 2 years now, about lowering his wages, and this will be the time he's going to lower his wages. Same thing, like, hey, we've been, you know, the papers have really been harping on Kessié and Ansu and Ferran. Like, I think they know that they should leave, they should go somewhere else, and eventually they're caved, like, right? And I think the club really does. Like, I think the board members, I mean, yeah, not to say that they're not like you and I, but like, I think they do believe that they're going to have the power and the social cachet to kind of get that stuff done, to put that pressure on those players to either take the wage reduction, or in the case of Kessié and Ansu and Ferran Torres, is to find a new home, is to make things easier for the club. That they, I mean, if everybody loves the club, then you're going to do what's right for the club, even that means you leaving the door. And it's always what we bring up. It's like, I'm not going to vilify, as you know, I'm not going to vilify any of the players that don't want to leave, because Barcelona signed them for a reason. Even if they failed to do what they were signed to do, they were signed by Barcelona for a number. And if Barcelona believed they were good enough for that number, well, they were good enough when they signed. So that means, in theory, they should still be that player somewhere in there. Ferran Torres is still not even 25. He's still in his early 20s. Ansu Fati, I mean, I know you're going to talk about him because he's 20, and I'm with you on I don't know. I can't do the Ansu thing again. There's no reason why Ansu Fati should leave the club except for the number, right? And now it's just like, it was, I don't know, but I'll ask you this question. It was the same thing we said about Messi that I said to Levon. If it's Ansu or Messi, what are you picking? And now that decision, Messi made that decision for Barcelona, and he said, don't make it me or Ansu. It's Ansu. Ansu's staying.
Thank you, Messi.
That's for him. Exactly. And so now in this case, if it's Ansu or Brozovic and Gundogan getting registered, then what do you pick?
Wow, Dan.
I think that's the decision they're making.
Wow, wow. I can't believe you asked this question. To me, oh my God, if I'm having to choose between registering Brozovic and Gundogan or having to sell Ansu, wow, this is literally this is like the bottom of the pit, as far as like our current economic situation goes. I mean, I guess you would have to sell Ansu. I mean, we signed Gundogan. We have to register him. I mean, we have to. But at the same time, this is not like the NBA or the NFL. Like, if Ansu, just how Frenkie didn't want to leave, and he didn't want to lower his wages as well. If the player doesn't want to do it, the club can't unilaterally force them to do it. So if Ansu wants to stay, there's nothing Laporta and Mateo can do. If Ferran wants to stay, there's nothing they can do as well. Same with Marcos Alonso, Eric Garcia, Kessié, and whatnot. So I get it. I know Ansu is the easier choice because everything that we receive for him is a surplus, while Ferran, we still need to recover a portion of what we paid for him, which we haven't paid in full yet. I completely understand that part, but it's just a matter of, like, I know what you said, like the Laporta and the board have they think they will be able to convince players, I mean, not everybody, but a few players to leave. But then how long will that take for them to convince those players? And will the I mean, not Gundogan because he already signed, and Inigo Martinez, but the Brozovic, the Amrabat, the potentially, who knows if we were going to be able to sign a right back, which right now doesn't look like we'll be able to. Will those players still be available by the time Laporta and company end up convincing, if they do, X, Y, and Z players to leave the club for whatever amount that ends up being? That's the balance. And still, like, I mean, we're still like, what, 5 days until July 1st, 3-4 days, whatever. So are they going to be able to convince them to leave before those players are out of the market? I don't have the answer. You don't either. It's just we're acting. This is like faith. That's what faith is.
Yeah.
Like believing in something without having proof.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
and almost to defend that hubris that I'm talking about, that I think it's fair for those men in suits and women in suits and ties and in that boardroom to have the hubris to say, we're going to get this done, right? Like when you're talking about numbers like 1.5 billion, like, not to say there's a lot of vibes, but there's a lot of trust. Like there is a lot of trust in a cult of personality. And I think when Laporta is working with Goldman Sachs and working with these companies and working with these things, there is no other option than almost irrational confidence in a front-facing way for that PR machine. So like, as much as people do criticize Laporta in that way, like you can't make these big deals with sponsors and things like that without showing utmost confidence. And that includes the confidence of getting done what needs to get done. And that's why, like, there's an overwhelming confidence that the club is going to reasonably unload Lenglet, Umtiti, Des, Caiado. Like, they're not worried about that stuff. They're saying, of course, we're going to do that stuff. And then we're also going to do the other stuff that needs to get done. All right, last thing here. Now, I feel like we were at a 10. Now we're going to take it down to probably a 2 because there's a weird situation with Arnau Tenas. This isn't really anything to discuss. So apparently Arnau Tenas spoke about his Barca future at Spain's U21s while they're at the U21 Euros, that he would potentially leave in the summertime. His contract is up at the end of the month, so in a few days, and it's been reported that Barcelona will renew the deal. And then it was coming out that they weren't going to renew the deal, and he was like seemingly getting mixed messages. And so his words were, it has come out that Barcelona is not executing the renewal. It is true, and I can confirm it. Now I'm with the national team, and I'm focused on this. So apparently the last thing he heard was that Barcelona are not going to renew him at all, and now he'll just be a free agent, and he's fighting about that on international duty, which is weird because Arnau Tenas seems always like one of those players who's come up from the academy that Barcelona, I mean, that he's willing to be at the club for very cheap wages and even just choose to be the third goalkeeper. It's this weird thing where it's just like he's basically agreeing to play for free, but Barcelona didn't want to renew his contract, which would go up a little bit. But it is a weird spot too. He's 22 now, and you can't really have him and Inaki Peña, who's going to be 25, sitting on the bench. So they do kind of have to pick one of those two. And I think it's unfortunate because him as a professional, he's kind of stagnated since he burst onto the scene at, 19 when he was playing for Spain's U20s, or maybe I'm thinking he was earlier than that, and maybe I'm thinking of the U17s, or maybe it was both. But, you get the point. He's been the Spain under whatever international goalkeeper for a few years now, and it's always felt like he's going to be, a really good goalkeeper. But now he's 22. At what point do you have to ask whether or not he's going to get opportunity? Because they're saying it's never been better, and he's behind Inaki Peña as well. So unless Inaki Peña leaves, and then Barca's in a weird spot, though. So I don't understand why they wouldn't take the renewal for a player who's so cheap and then sell him for, you know what I mean? Like, what's the difference? What's the variance between selling him or letting him walk free to guarantee you're going to not have his wages next year, or renew him for whatever is like 2.5 or 3, whatever the new renewal is for, and then trying to sell him for 1.5 and eating that 1 mil. I know that every million counts, but it's like, it's a weird thing and a weird timeline. I don't understand how the club went about that.
The only thing I'm going to say if he ends up going, I'm going to miss him, because it seemed like every time there was I wouldn't say a fight per se, but there was things got tense. I would see Arnau Tenas being right in the middle of everything, just ready to.
He was a big member of FC Vibes. He was a starter
exactly.
around FC
and
Vibes.
You need players like that. So even though he didn't play at all, I always liked the fact that then when there was a foul on Gavi or anything that was just controversial and just like we're ready for a fight, he was a soldier. and he was like in the front line, like, "Where are we gonna fight? Okay, let's go. I'm ready. This is what I'm here for." So I don't know. You explained it perfectly. It's either you're gonna like either an Autenas or forget the Galatasaray. Iñaki Peña, exactly. So, because Ter Stegen ain't going anywhere, especially after last season. So it's a matter of I would be an Autenas type of guy. Like, hey, I'm a millionaire living in Barcelona, my hometown, and I'm getting paid to train. I'm not even getting paid to play. I'm just getting paid to be in shape, go to the gym, and that's it. Not even have the pressure of being Ter Stegen. So to me, that's the perfect life. I get to party as well and be like, hey, I'm at Nautenas. I'm the third goalkeeper of FC Barcelona. I get to go on trips and expeditions and everything. So I don't blame him. If you would tell me, Rafa, what footballer would you want to be? Messi, Ter Stegen, Pedri? I would tell you I would want to be at Nautenas. I would want to have that life. So again, hopefully, like you said, I've read mixed information. Like it seems like he's going to renew. Then it looks like he's not going to renew. Then he says that he has gotten like mixed information and whatnot. So, like I'm not the biggest fan of the summer transfer window because it's so hectic. I know some people love it, but it's so hectic and it's so all over the place. And even though like, look how all over the place it is that we're talking about like Arnautenas' like contract situation or third goalkeeper. So it's I don't know. Hopefully he stays, but it's just so like it's the perfect example of the craziness that is the transfer window, the summer transfer window. It's June 27th.
At this point, when we're recording, yeah.
Exactly, when we're recording.
This might already be completely over, yeah. But
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you. My left knee in particular would love to be 22 and Arnautovic again. Yeah, for sure. 100%. So anyway, he's Aldamuy Football. So that's down in the show notes. Follow him on YouTube, especially with the Spanish content. Follow him also on TikTok, on Instagram, all those different places as well. So
and we got some cool videos. I went to the beautiful game down in Orlando, cover that game. Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos, Vinicius Dybala. There weren't a lot of Barcelona players and whatnot. Yeah. A bunch of Brazilians, but there's some great video. I know Vinicius is the enemy, but he's such an amazing footballer. And I hate the fact that he plays for Real Madrid because he's so good. It was an exhibition game.
Yeah.
But wow. So you should go out check my videos on Instagram and TikTok of Vinicius and whatnot. So let's enjoy him while he's not wearing a white shirt.
Well, it might not be too long, maybe January or next year when Vita World Cup, there might be another Brazilian playing in that competition.
There we go.
So hopefully, yeah. So
I love me some Brazilians.
That's Aldamuy Football, wherever you get your content, and then the Barcelona podcast for us. You know where to find us. So thanks for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Of course, Barca.